What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Dirty Blonde podcast. My name is Bridgette B. And if you have Google and you are over the age of 18 and you've never heard of me, go ahead, take a moment while I grab a sip of my rosé. Okay, you're done? Okay, good. Yep, that's me. What's up? It's so good to be here this week. I am so excited to get into this topic because I'll be honest, I'm on my period, been on my period, and I've been craving sweets. Listen, it's what happens when you are a naturally born woman. You just have these times of the month. And for me, I always gravitate towards sugar. I usually stay away from it during the month on a normal basis because of the diet and this and that. But while I was reaching for yet another morsel of decadent, sweet, and ever so good chocolate, I started thinking about sugar. But not so much just sugar, but sugar babies and sugar daddies. And then that's why I said, ding, 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 Bridgette. This is your topic this week. So grab a sweet of choice in honor of the topic, or do as I do every fucking week, which is a glass of something. This week, if you have watched my YouTube for Dirty Blonde, it's on YouTube, just follow it. I was researching on some sexy wines to try under $20. And right now I'm drinking the rosé that I reviewed because it was just that darn tasty. So I'm having a glass of that. Join me and let's get into it because it's going to be very interesting. I'm already going to tell you right now. Stay tuned. What's a sugar baby? What's a sugar daddy? As I go into Wikipedia right here in front of me, because I like to give you actual, not just verbatim. Sugar dating, also called sugaring, is a transactional dating practice typically characterized by an older, wealthier person and a younger person in need of financial assistance and mutually beneficial relationship. You can have a sugar daddy or a sugar mama, and money can be received, payment can be received by way of money, gifts, support, or other material benefits in exchange for companionship or a dating-like relationship. Great. Common sense leads us to all say, yeah, Bridgette, thanks, Captain Obvious. We totally get it. Awesome. Sometimes some people don't know, so I like to give the actual definition. So we're going to take the sugar baby situation to its basic form, which is younger females. Yes, you could have young men in gay-like relationships. The list is never ending, it seems. There's a new name for a new person every day. But because I am a naturally born woman, I can only talk about experiences that I've gone through. So we're going to keep it very simple. Don't come for me because why am I not including everybody? I don't have the time. We're going to talk about me. Blondes with big tits, porn stars, because that's what I am. Okay. So in the basic form, and we talk about the basic sugar baby that I could be of assistance with, would be someone in the 18 to 26-year-old. Usually once you hit the age of, honestly, you know what? I'm even going to go younger. Yeah, I'm going to say 18 to like 21. And I'm saying that because I'm talking about what I've gone through in college, etc. And I was 18, 19, 20, 21. And all of the efforts that were made by older gentlemen were pretty prevalent during that specific time of my life. So let's take it to a even younger basic form of sugar baby, which is 18 to, let's say, 21. Let's say a girl in college, right? Great. And I think the reason why I got so many offers while I was that particular age group is because I was just really fucking innocent. I damn near lost my virginity when I was almost 20. My first kiss, my first everything was that relationship in college. I had no idea what a dick looked like. I blushed every time someone even mentioned the word tits. Yet, I became a stripper towards the end of my college career. Like, how did I go from point A to point Z in a matter of 4 years? We'll get into that. So, when arrangements are made in such a way, is it legal? That's a big question that comes up quite a bit. And it is-ish, legal-ish. There's a lot of loopholes in the world of escorting and the world of prostitution, and one is not like the other. What a gentleman wants to do with his free time during his lunch break under a bridge in what was that show on HBO, like Hunts Point, picking up prostitutes, is his prerogative. That's what he wants to do. He wants to pick someone up for $40 for 20 minutes, whatever it is, knock yourself out. None of my business. But is it legal? Not so much. With the transaction of a relationship in exchange for your time, etc., is why the world of sugaring is so prevalent and pretty big when you are a female in that age of college. And I'll tell you why. Well, Bridgette, where did sugar babies and sugar daddies come from? Where did it start? What happened? Well, I know where it started, and we're going to get into it here. Isn't that amazing? I kind of did my homework. I'm very, very happy for myself. Okay. So let's start with the little historical facts. And I am such a fan of vintage anything. So anytime I do some background work, and I like the episode on small dick humiliation previous 2 episodes ago, take a listen if you haven't. I love learning things that I never learned about before. And this was a topic that, although I'm very familiar with, I didn't really know. So I wanted to be as informed as possible, to be as best of a dirty blonde host as possible myself. So as the digging was happening, I realized that this has been around forever. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, much like our small dick humor started with Roman times, again, season 2, episode 8. Sugaring has been around forever, but it's been around in different forms. And it's interesting. In around early 1500s, and I would say between 1500s to 1700s, according to the research, royal mistresses were some of the most earlier examples of sugar babies. They were financially supported by kings. Interesting, huh? There was a couple of names that have stood out, and I don't know if it's because the king themselves was most popular, but I digress. The names that popped up quite a bit in the articles that I read was a Diane de Poitiers, who was the chief mistress of King Henry II in the early 1500s. She was a mistress, considered now modern day a sugar baby. But she went on to become an influential member of the French court. See? A smart hoe. I like that already. And in the 1700s, we had a Madame de Pompadour. I am butchering that till no end. I'm very sorry to anyone who is French. Pardon-moi. Madame de Pompadour was the official mistress of Louis the 15th. But she too went on to become a powerful member of the courts. And she secured a title for herself and her family. So another smart hoe. And then by around 1901, early 1900s, there was a rule. And the rule was the quote-unquote ideal bride was often described as half your age plus 7. Google it. That's what it was. And then as the mid-20s came about, you had the flapper girl culture, which if we've all seen The Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, one of my most favorite movies ever. And it's an era that if I was born around that time, or if I was in my younger years in the 20s, I would have totally been a flapper girl. And sugar daddy became a bigger part of culture, meaning a man who spoils a younger female companion with gifts was very prevalent in the flapper culture. And we've seen that in countless movies of that era and in books that we've read. And then my favorite era of all, old Hollywood glamour with Marilyn Monroe, the quintessential classic Americana. We have Jane Mansfield. We have the Betty Pages of the world. You have these movies and these MGM and major movie productions in about the 50s creating movies so popular such as, and raise your hand if you watched, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, and Breakfast at Tiffany's with the beautiful Audrey Hepburn. At around the 50s, in a world after, I mean, the Depression happened years before that, but as we were getting into a different era, movies were becoming a large part of culture. People were going to drive-ins and people were, making dates to go see the cinema. And what are the movies that Hollywood were pushing down our throats? Sugaring. If you think about it, you're like, no shit. No wonder I've always heard about this topic, but I never really knew what it was, which led me to the episode this week. And then our most famous sugar daddy of them all, round of applause, drum roll please, Mr. Hugh Hefner. Yes, Mr. Hugh Hefner is the epitome of what I would consider old glamour, vintage sugar daddy. We all know the story. May he rest in paradise. And who was the very first celebrity on the very first Playboy cover? Our beautiful Marilyn Monroe. Ladies and gentlemen, Hollywood doesn't do things out of thin air. Everything is for a reason. So here we are with sugaring becoming that much more of a popular topic, much more of a popular lifestyle. Around the 2000s, the early 2000s, we get a Mr. Brandon Wade. Mr. Brandon Wade launched seekingarrangement.com with an online presence unlike it ever happened before. I mean, I remember being in college and having to have a Facebook. In order to have Facebook, I had to have an actual college email account. So at that age, in order for me to be online, I already had to have a college account. So, and that's counting over this demographic that we're talking about, the very early college years, etc. So Brandon Wade launches Seeking Arrangement, and they become unique because they become the online presence of sugaring becomes more prevalent because online tech and entrepreneurs who created websites such as Seeking Arrangement and Ashley Madison evolved this term, evolved this way of life that for most wasn't so accessible. But now, holy shit, you mean to tell me that I can be this guy in Iowa worth a couple of $1 million and I can start talking to a sexy girl in California going to college at UCLA? Shut the fuck up. And this is where the world we live in is now. What made Seeking Arrangement different than its counterparts on internet and the World Wide Web, as we called it back then. Well, not we, I never called it that, but you know what I mean. Was interesting. Seeking Arrangement's marketing technique focused and zeroed in on helping to pay for higher education. So if you go back, and I went back to some advertisements and some posts and articles, etc., where Seeking Arrangement was that website for the wealthy man to help the young girl in college. That's what it really focused in on. And you wonder, okay. It worked because it became the number one website for ages, for years to come, until obviously many more came afterwards. But that type of mentality, if you think about it, is very much in parallel with what happened to our royal mistresses. The pioneers of the 1500s and 1600s, the mistresses of Louis the 15th and all the Henrys and Adams and Joes. These sugar babies, as online presence became more prevalent, were seen as, dare I say, goal-driven, street smarts, where they wanted to pay off their student debt or their student loan instead of getting a new Cartier watch like they did in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or How to Marry a Millionaire. When Marilyn Monroe, and listen, if any Hollywood executive listens to my podcast, and if any motherfucker does a remake of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and they don't cast me, I'm having an uproar. It's like been my dream to recreate and do like a modern day How to Marry a Millionaire, but I guess when I start my own production company, I'll have to do it. But I digress. So with the early 2000s coming about, they sort of did a new take on what sugaring was, because Hollywood had presented to us a situation where it was more about material things. But history has us learning that it indeed started from something far greater and far more, again, dare I say, positive. A woman wanting to succeed financially on her own terms, that's pretty fucking sexy, I think. So with that little history lesson that I just gave you, let's see and you can't say you don't learn anything from this fucking podcast. Let's take a little different approach. Let's do this. All right. Unless you're driving, which as I'm pretty aware, so many of you all are listening to me on your way to work, or like that Friday afternoon on your way home from work. It's like your guilty pleasure, and I fucking love it. So unless you're not driving, but if you're on the toilet, if you're on the john, or if you're trying to hide from your wife and you have your iPods in, whatever you're doing, close your eyes and let's play a little game. What is your vision of a sugar daddy and a sugar baby? What does a sugar daddy look to you? Da na da na da da na da dun dun dun. In case I get copyrighted. I'm going to guess, and there is no survey, there's no group focus group that I tackled, but I'm going to take a wild guess. For the most part, when we close our eyes and think what a typical sugar daddy and sugar baby look like, we think about a creepy old guy who has lots of money and a beautiful young Russian, or a beautiful young Ukrainian, or a beautiful young anything. But for the most part, and we can thank 90 Day Fiancé for this one, don't even roll your eyes. If you're listening, you know it's the fucking truth. The media has portrayed so much of creepy old guy next to a beautiful blonde, and it's always a fucking blonde, Russian, Eastern European, or whatever bullshit. And that's because of, if you see what are the top rated shows, especially during lockdown, 90 Day Fiancé was really fucking up there. That typical creepy old guy with a chick that's maybe dressed in stripper heels while she's at the grocery store, whatever it is, there is a certain stereotype. Much like there is a stereotype for a porn star, much like there's a stereotype for a girl next door, much like there's a stereotype for your millionaire. However, not all sugar daddies drive a Bugatti Chiron, you know what I'm saying? Chiron. Not all millionaires drive a Bugatti. Not every millionaire is sipping a vintage red off his Napa or Aspen chalet or vineyard. Because in the late 90s, The Millionaire Next Door, which was a book written by Stanley and Danko, changed the way of understanding what wealthy could look like. It was a real game changer. And if anyone has ever tried to be a sugar baby, that should be their Bible, because everything that we were taught to learn from, early on, that, wealthy was the prince, the sheiks, the man with opulence, etc. All of a sudden, your next door neighbor was that millionaire. I mean, hello, Warren Buffett. Just because he wasn't driving a Bugatti or something like that, and just because he's driving a mid-sized car, didn't mean he didn't have money. It just meant that he was a different type of wealth. And this is where modern day sugar babies had to adapt. They had to learn real damn quick, well, who has money and who's just trying to fuck me for free. You know what I'm saying? I mean, think about it. The top 1% of the whole world, I think the motto is the top 1% is owns like 60% of the actual monetary wealth. Some sort of ridiculous statement like that. And it's true. There's this one guy who, that one prince who was in the articles in the New York Times this morning. He owns an $88 million penthouse in New York City, but he lives in Abu Dhabi. So that kind of a wealthy man who for us would be the typical sugar daddy, all of a sudden with this book that became a national New York best time seller gave a different perspective. And like I mentioned before, we are all guilty of believing what the media wants to feed us. So if in the 1950s, MGM Studios wanted you to think that Marilyn Monroe was your typical sugar baby because she's dumb blonde with big tits, acting a fool on a ship, that's what you're going to believe. So why is it any different that we have a book that comes out, that it's a New York Times bestseller? Now, all of a sudden, everyone's learning that maybe I have to look at my next door neighbor a little bit more closely. Now, listen, I am no Tony Robbins. I'm not Oprah Winfrey. I don't have millions and billions in the bank. Shit, I'm trying to figure all that out myself. So I'm not here to give you any financial advice. But I think we can all agree, and it's just something that you learn in basic economics 101. Now, bear with me here. ROIs. I hope if you're listening to this, you know that means return on investments. And I only say that because, it's basic economics. And I'm a firm believer in that culturally, we really should be teaching our youth so much more financial savviness for real life. But I digress. It's a whole nother episode that we'll get there one day. Okay. So when you have a sugar-like relationship, and I put that in very light quotes, isn't it safe to assume that both consenting adult parties, again, we're talking about it being done in a legal way and a consenting way, and two adults. And listen, I don't live in China. I don't live in North Korea where there is rules upon rules. That's not my culture. I live in the beautiful US of A, where freedom of rights, freedom of First Amendment is prevalent, and it's what I'm defending every fucking day. So if I am a consenting adult of sound mind, body, and spirit with another consenting adult who understands what this relationship is, how is it that it's still looked down upon so much? It's interesting. So let's go back to the return on investment. As I mentioned earlier with the book, The Next Door Millionaire, etc., and Silicon Valley and Google tech, Google and big tech all coming up, you all of a sudden had a different kind of wealth. In the era of my favorite era, the Gatsby, you didn't have a Mr. Gatsby running around with a white tuxedo and a beautiful drink in his hand, courting all the women. All of a sudden, you had dumb fucks like Zuckerberg walking around with day-old t-shirts every day with the same shorts, driving a Prius. whatever that car choice is. Listen, I'm not knocking Priuses. Fucking love those cars. Why? Because Larry David. I digress. So, holy shit, guys. What we were learning about wealth years ago, all of a sudden with the online presence, and all of a sudden, such as the Zuckerbergs of our era, the Bill Gates, these men who are frankly trying to control everything and trying to be God, are more wealthy and richer monetarily than anyone, including me, could ever possibly see in their lifetime. But they look like your next door nerd. And I love nerds, but they're dorky. Anyone who tells me Zuckerberg is hot is tripping, because he is not my kind of dude. But this whole form of wealth has changed. So now it gets a little bit harder, because these wealthy men in modern day era, for modern day sugaring, all of a sudden are working smarter, not harder. So their ROIs in relationships are completely different than where they were in the 50s, or even where they were in the 20s with flappers. Let's put this into simpler context. Let's say we're looking at a typical wealthy man, modern day wealthy man. Let's look at a typical San Francisco, lives in Silicon, yada, yada, yada. He made all his money from opening a app on Apple. Shout out to iTunes. Thank you for charting me top 150 podcast for like fucking 10th week in a row. Yay. So if we have these types of wealthy men whose vision is so different from what it used to be, and we really have no idea who our next door neighbor really could be, and arrangements such as seekingarrangements.com are so popular, that means that this new generation of wealth, of possible sugar daddies, are looking for an ROI that is worth their wealth. So this modern time sugar daddy is expecting his money to go a lot further with his sugar baby. Now, if we take that and reverse it for the female, let's say a typical cute chick, doesn't have to be Russian, but she probably is. I have a lot of Russian friends. I'm allowed to say that. So for the typical girl, how much of her time is she willing to invest to gain financial benefits? So if we assume that she's one of the smart ones, right? If we assume that she's one of our pioneer mistresses from the 1500s and, to the 1700s and so on with Louis the 14th and whatever Henry it was, who, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, those mistresses went on to become influential members of royal courts because they used their savviness. They used the wealth that they gained during that sugaring relationship to better the life for themselves and their family, whatever it is that they had to do. If we assume that she's one of those smart ones and not the one that just wants a relationship to get a new, Louis Vuitton handbag, she goes to college. She has what? Schoolwork. Maybe she's in a sorority. Maybe she's doing something cute like in a dance team. So she has a lot of fucking free time. I remember being in college doing keg stands at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon before going to my, I think it was like visual merchandising class. Basically, I went to all my fucking lectures wasted. How the fuck I graduated is still beyond me. I think it's because I wore a skirt with no underwear, but who knows? But these pioneers, right, of mistresses that began this sugaring so fucking long ago, all of a sudden you realize that in modern era, with the Brandon Wades of the world who created these .coms, where a guy on the opposite side of the world can court a young girl needing to pay her tuition bill just by giving him some time. All of a sudden, you go down to the basics of it. What is her ROI? What is that modern day sugar baby's ROI that would make it beneficial for her to be a sugar baby? Now, let's remember, you don't want to confuse a sugar baby with an escort or a prostitute or even a porn star or a stripper. Every single type of genre of sex, and I say sex work, is dependent on the individual. Whatever that individual needs and whatever their needs are needed, sorry for the many needs, whatever their needs are needed to be met, not only physically, but emotionally as well, is what I think, and again, this is all my opinion, is what I think determines what their ROI is needed to continue such choices. Did I lose you there? Let's take it a little bit more basic. And what I'm going to take it to is why the fuck I chose this episode. Why is it that I've never had a sugar daddy? With all the talk and the chat about ROI, it's a perfect segue into why I haven't wanted or needed a sugar daddy myself. Now, don't get me wrong. I have been wined and dined. I've been taken to the best restaurants. I've been taken on private jets. I've gone and seen amazing shows backstage and met actors. It's endless. My experiences, I have been so grateful and so blessed. But from a very young age, not as Bridgette B, but just as myself, as a normal girl in college, I understood that the exchange of time was my deal breaker with ROIs, my personal ROI. Because when I was in college, I was offered to be a sugar baby all the fucking time. Older men would come at the strip club that I was working at as a cocktail waitress and then developed into a stripper. And that we're going to talk about in a future episode. I mean, every single night in Ohio, because I went to college in Ohio, there wasn't ever not an older gentleman or even just a gentleman in general who would say, my name back then, oh my God, was it Star or Diamond? I can't even remember. Cat, something like that. You're too beautiful to be stripping. Come on, honey. Let me just take care of you. I will take such good care of you. I'll give you this apartment overlooking the flats. And girls at the club would look at me all the time because especially that I was so innocent. I was so young. At that point, I only had one boyfriend when I started working as a cocktail waitress. And these girls were just looking at me like I was nuts. Like, yo, how could you turn down this wealthy man to strip for dollars on this stage? Like, are you fucking kidding me? And It was endless. Girls would always be like, oh my gosh, she's so stupid. I would do it this, I would blah, 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 blah. But you guys, the answer was and always has been more simple than even I could explain it. My return on investment from that age was so much more expensive that no amount of money any of these motherfuckers could offer me was ever going to be worth it. However, we all have a price. If someone in college would have offered me $1 million to be a sugar baby, I would have dropped my motherfucking stripper heels in the front door of the club and said, deuces, motherfuckers, I'm out. But $1 million wasn't worth it. $1 million wasn't being offered. Don't get me wrong. They were offering to pay for my school. They were offering to pay me for a new apartment. But I didn't need that. Because you see, I wanted that young girl, and my name wasn't Bridgette at that time, but that young girl that I remember and that I hold her so dear in my heart, she wanted to enjoy college. I've never had a greedy mentality. I think if you've been a follower of mine and you've seen me on Instagram and you follow me on Twitter, etc., I hope you have been able to understand the essence of who I am, not only as Bridgette B, but just as a fucking person, you know? My positive existence, my peaceful existence, and I put that in like capital letters. My peaceful existence is all because no one has ever forced me to do anything I've never wanted to do. All of my career choices, from getting fired, before I started porn, to being a waitress at Olive Garden, to being a stripper, all of that, it was all me. I said what I wanted to do when I wanted to. And I've always had that mentality. I think it's because I'm a Libra, but I definitely have a Leo rising, and I follow astrology as one of my favorite things. But because of who I am to my core, because when I was a stripper, I felt powerful, and I was happy knowing that I could make my own hours. I could go to the club when I wanted, and I chose who I wanted to dance for. If one motherfucker even tried to disrespect me at the club, and a couple of dicks tried, they didn't get away with it. My heel was so far up their fucking throat, their dick went right back in their mouth. I can check a person real quick because my respect is worth so much more than whatever money anyone at that time had to offer me. But I also digress, and I'm honest and transparent. We all have a price. We all have a price for what we're willing to do at a certain time. I'm not saying that there's certain things I would do now that I would have done 20 years ago. Well, no, 10 years ago. I'm not that old. 10 years ago would be the same that I do now, but it's because I know better. And my ROI has increased by tenfold. So what would have been maybe acceptable for $1 million when I was in college for me to even consider being your sugar baby has now, because I work hard as fuck, because of my work ethic, because I enjoy to entertain, and that is what I do for a living. Now my ROI is $1 billion. You know what I mean? So the investment in time and money has changed for me. Now, my friends in college who did accept sugar daddies and who totally had them for themselves, they didn't want to have a job. And they know this. The last thing these bitches wanted to do was wake up, have to go to class, and then all of a sudden drive in the little Pontiac Sunfire, go to the strip club, and dance for dollar bills or 20s or hundreds, whatever. But that's who I was. I mean, shit. Even this podcast is a labor of my own sweat and tears. Nobody gave me this platform. I had to make it for myself. So if there is one thing that anyone can ever say about Bridgette B is that she's fucking consistent. When I started the adult industry, I started it because I never saw it as this, I'm fucking for money. Woohoo! Great. I'm in really wonderful set life where I have some of the best gentlemen and I have women who are so beautiful. So luckily, my career has me surrounded by wonderful people and a positive environment. Like I've said in other podcasts, that's not true for everyone, and I feel for them, and I would never take that away from them. But because I am who I am, Bridgette B came about. Bridgette B came about because I always wanted to entertain. And when I saw how Hollywood, because I was not willing to give my own personal time, etc. And you can read between the lines however you'd like, but I'll tell you what, in porn, we didn't invent the casting couch. The casting couch, ladies and gentlemen, has been around a very long time, but that's not what this show's about. Read between the lines, do your own research, but what makes me so proud about my industry is that things that other industries stand for and sort of base their whole corporate culture around, that shit doesn't exist. I can't ever say that I was given an ultimatum or, forced into anything at work, because no one would dare do that to me. And I've been that way now as Bridgette B, and I was that way as that little college girl stripping for dollars to pay her college because I wanted the freedom to go to a frat party, or I wanted the freedom to date whoever I wanted because my time was my ROI that had no fault, that there was no other option. And, that $1 million wasn't being offered. Again, I'm just being honest. And listen, as I always say, one of my biggest mottos is just do whatever the fuck makes you happy. Like, life is just too fucking short. And I've always been the way. So anyway, so as society is realizing kind of more and more, and I mean, who knows what's really happening behind closed doors? Because right now, dating is harder than ever, and I'm sure it's always been that way. But dating is hard. For a female, you can have someone who's just lying to you. As a female, that guy could have a full-blown relationship in another city. Hello, Lacey Peterson? And we can have women who lie about their age and pretend they're not cougars. No, bitch, you aren't 35, you're really 50. So in a culture where lying is also so prevalent, and if you heard my other podcast, season 2, episode 8, which is 2 podcasts ago about small dick, where men, even when they're about to go into a focus group, lie about their size of their penis to make it sound bigger. It is safe to assume that you are literally going into this dating world. You're trying to go in with both feet on the ground, and you're basically just hoping for the fucking best. At this point, if he's not a serial killer, hey, that's a plus in my book. And I got my girls who are on Tinder, on Hinge, and I'm hearing all of the fucking stories. So when I, as a porn star, where all of society assumes that I am a certain way, and I'm telling you that I am not, it's not because it hasn't been given to me. It's not because the opportunity hasn't been there. It's just because at the end of the day, we all need to have our own personal ROIs. Our mistresses, our pioneers of sugaring from the 1500s, those bitches did what they did, but they became super influential. And Marilyn Monroe in How to Marry a Millionaire or Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, I forget which one, all she wanted to do was to have that jewelry and have those diamonds. If Mr. Piggy, I think was his name, who cares that wasn't her type? All she wanted was the money. And then now into modern day era where online presence, and especially nowadays where we've all been stuck in our homes, what's your personal ROI as a female? Because I love my female listeners, and I love how so many of you are in relationships and you listen to the podcast. If you look into yourself and you think, what would I do if given the opportunity? That's when we have to say, not only as society, but as ourselves, I have no business judging anybody. Because what someone does behind closed doors, and I will say this, I always have to say this disclaimer. I'm like, yes, as long as it's within legal boundaries and it's as long as you're not hurting someone else. I mean, for fuck's sakes, at this point, as I'm in my 30s, if you're listening to this and you're an adult, that should be a no-brainer. Of course, that's just being a positive addition to society. So that disclaimer, I'm just going to keep saying it, but you know what I'm saying. So as we've learned through going through history with the sugaring and everything, I hope that it broadens and inspires you in a way to do your own research, and where the positivity is always, always within us. No one can make that or put that on you or my next door neighbor or myself. And that is why me, Bridgette B, have never been a sugar baby. Well, guys, that is it for me and for this week's episode of the Dirty Blonde Podcast. Share your stories on the Dirty Blonde Twitter, on Instagram. All the links are always in the episode description, thanks to Podcast Playground. And I'm always there. I love talking to you all. It's so fun because I want it to always be a place for, I've said it before, I'm like, people say shit about me left and right all the time. Do I care? No. But as long as you guys are kind to each other, share your stories. I want it to be an open format, and I learn from you guys, and hopefully as much as you can hopefully learn from me. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you pod. Thank you so much for listening. I am so happy to have shared this moment and this time of your week with you. Make sure you stay tuned to next week's episode. And until next episode, next time you listen to me, stay dirty. Love you so much. And make sure you subscribe to YouTube because we're going to get more in depth on this subject. See you next episode. Bye.